Hey, so you like vibe coding? You like just coding with AI, using these coding assistants, and letting it do a lot of the work? That's vibe coding, especially if you use your voice. Highly advised. But you don't like when it just starts going off the rails or it turns it into this big mess that you make one change and it changes other things and it doesn't know how to fix the errors that it's creating because of that. We've got some solutions for you that absolutely will get you past that level. We will take you to level 2 vibe coding with this video. Hang on for the ride. What we're going to look at is we're going to build a YouTube application, sort of, and allow the AI to build all of it. The AI will build an application that'll have a home page and a channel page. You can search for channels, show the videos that they have, as well as the information about the channel, and we'll even attempt, but I think we do a pretty good job of making it as elegant as possible with a single prompt at the end. So it's kind of fun to see what AI can do when we just basically say, make it pretty, please. But our big takeaway from all of this is vibe coding level 2, and what that really means is you're a partner with this AI. Don't think that the AI is some servant for you, that you can just give it a list of things to do, walk away, and when those items come back to you, they'll be done perfectly. It doesn't understand the context well enough. So once you learn how to work with AI cooperatively, you'll be building great applications that are highly sustainable in the future. I guarantee this is going to change the way that you vibe code. And it's super easy. Really, you don't really have to do much. Let's dive in and take a look. Okay, so we're going to cover building this application and showing you some of the pitfalls and then showing you ways to correct it. But first, I want to introduce you to a couple of the tools that I'll be using just so you're not surprised when you see my screen. There's going to be some somewhat unique things happening on the screen, so I just want to make you aware. So the first one is I'm going to be using the cursor editor. It's just a standard editor that allows AI. So it's nothing special, but if you're not used to these editors, there's a lot of different panels. I'll point them out the first time around just so that you kind of have some orientation. But that's the editor I'm using. You can use Windsurf for the same kind of vibe coding that I'll be doing with it, which is kind of this agentic vibe coding. I'll describe that in a second as well. But also I will be talking to the screen. And you'll hear that in a second. And what I'm using to talk to the screen is an application called Super Whisper. Super Whisper is just a way to do speech to text, and you'll see that here. I'll pull cursor up. This happens to be the cursor application. And if I start talking, you'll see the disclosure here up top that's showing Super Whisper in action, but it's not putting any of the text into the field until I complete. And so at that point, you can see the information drop in. So you may be confused by these waveforms and all this other stuff that's happening. Reality is I'm just using speech to text to more quickly get information into the system, also so that you know exactly what I'm putting into it. And as well, it's really the common pattern these days to do vibe coding, though you can type in the entire time as well. You do not have to speak to it. This is just, to me, a faster way to do it and a more disconnected way. Let's get started with that. So basically we have cursor. We're going to start a new project in Cursor. In the code folder, I'll create a new project folder. Doesn't matter what you call it. And so now we have a new project called YT Vibes. And at this point, I will take you through a very brief walkthrough of how Cursor works. On the left will be the project files. You'll see that very quickly. At the bottom, I will hide and show a panel, which is where the terminal lives. So it's kind of the place that you'd start your server and stop your server, that kind of stuff. And on the right side is where we'll spend most of our time looking at the composer. This just happens to be with Cursor. Other systems may give you different mechanisms to do this. Enough of this. I just want to vibe code. Okay, I'm in the composer, and there's an agent aspect to this instead of a normal aspect. And I'm going to tell it that I need a new application with Next.js and some other things. Hey, I need a new application built. It's going to be a web application. It will probably have some server stuff. So I think I want to use Next.js as kind of the framework to build it in and React. But I also want you to choose a really nice, kind of elegant component library, visual component library. So the styling I want to be done with a component library rather than by hand. So pick one that you like, that you think I'm looking to build something hopefully elegant in the end of this. So something that you feel like has enough components, but can also really reflect a nice, clean, elegant style. All right, here we go. And that's how it starts. It'll go make its plan, you'll see this, and right after it makes its plan, you'll see that it asks, hey, I've got to create some files. And right after I submit this, it'll go kick off and start creating these files. I will then pause this and come back when everything's kind of in place so that you don't have to wait through it. Okay, here we are. It says I've finished everything. It's created some of the files over here. It's also asking me to run this command. I will run it here and it'll open up something like a code window that has a terminal in it that it can see. All right, and now if we look in here, we'll see that our application that it just built is running here. If we go to it, it throws an error, but that's fine. This is kind of how vibe coding works. Get a simple error, toss it in, and it goes, oh yeah, I forgot something. Let me go check that out. Okay, here we are again. Everything's up and running. Looks like we have our application running over here. All right, so looking at the information back here, I'm gonna go ahead and accept all, which is very vibe code of me. And we can come take a very quick look at how the system is working right now. There's a single page, not surprisingly, that says, welcome to YT Vibes, elegant new web application. That looks great. Hey, great. So far things are looking okay. I think what I'm going to build is an application that uses the YouTube API, and I wouldn't mind if you stubbed that out. We're not going to install that just yet, but very soon. But what I do need is kind of a homepage that has a search field on it, and that search field is going to take in a URL to a channel or the channel ID, kind of the @name of the channel itself. And then when it takes in one of those values, clicking the button will take you to the channel page where we're going to show you information about that channel. Again, we're not really going to tie any of that in, but I'd like you to be able to, no matter what, from that homepage, when we click on the button, take us to the channel page, just so that we can see that transition initially. Okay, it's moving ahead. All right, let's see what happens if we click the button. Nothing yet. Put something in, click the button. Okay, and it takes me to a channel page, and I'll jump back. Great. So let's quickly take a look at the code that it dropped for us. I'm going to accept everything, close the composer so that we can kind of look at the code that's being generated, because I want to describe to you what it is likely doing. It might not be, so that would be awesome. We go back to our original page document. Oh, this one's doing great. So this one is already on the right path to code separation in the way that we want, which is really, really good news. Very frequently, most frequently, this search channel object here, which happens to be these two components together. It might even be the label here. Nope, it just looks like these two components, the field and the button. They have put that into a subcomponent over here. Very frequently when I do this, this will actually be this form. So it'll just drop all of this in this location. And what that creates is a heavy home page that has multiple concerns. It's concerned with showing you home, basically the information, as well as it gets concerned with the search field and the button and handling submit. Those aren't really its concerns. And so when we talk about separating concerns, which is what this is all about, we really want to make sure that this happens. This is a scenario that it just happened to happen, and it was maybe 1 out of 10 times that it does this in this way. But if we have things constructed in a way and we have files in place that are telling Cursor, this is what we want you to do, or in fact, we tell it to do it every time, it will do this much better. And so what happens here, let me describe to you what would generally happen is on the channel page over here, we are going to add a search field. So let's do that now. On the channel page, I want to be able to search as well. So I want to make sure that I can search for channels and go directly to them for there as well. And so in most cases, what will happen is since it wrote out in this page the full form, it doesn't have a component to essentially reuse here. But in this case, since it built it correctly in the first place, it finds that component and it reuses it. So this is really the right pattern. This is what we're really hoping to create, is a pattern that this always happens. The reason this is important is for a very simple example. If we said, hey, in this search form, I really want the button to be an arrow, an icon, instead of an actual button. Well, there would be 2 search forms if it had been written on the channel page and the home page. And so that is a minimum. It's the smallest problem, but it is a real problem that all of a sudden it has to know to make that change in multiple places. But it's very likely when you described it, you'll say, hey, on the home page, when in that search field, I want that to be an arrow. And it will take that literally and not change it on the channel page. So that's one of the reasons we want to separate these concerns. There will be other reasons, and I'm sure we'll bump into some, or we may not, because the next thing we're going to move into is kind of setting this thing up to be able to separate this code appropriately every single time. So let's take a look. That's really the tip that we're going for here. Let's see what it looks like to do something like that. All right, in the top level folder of the application that you're writing, Cursor, this just happens to be a Cursor specific pattern, but I know Windsurf has a similar pattern. And what you need for Cursor to house this information is a folder at the top called Cursor, .cursor, I should say. And inside of the Cursor folder, you'll need another folder called Rules. Inside of the Rules folder, we're allowed to make as many files as you like. And it's probably best to keep those files focused on what they're for. And so the first one I will create is a new file called separation. So what we're going to describe here, it doesn't really matter what you name it, because inside of it, when we go into it, you'll see. What we're going to put in this one is instructions that Cursor should use whenever it's creating components or pages or parts, that kind of stuff, refactoring, moving things around. It needs to read these instructions to be aware of the fact that we have a way that you want to structure code. We're kind of informing you. In reality, you'll see when we go into this file, it'll say, use this anytime that you're creating components, visual elements, or refactoring. Okay, so here we go. We have this markdown file that I've put in here. Basically, what I'm describing in here is everything needs to have a single responsibility. That's the separation of concern concept. Any object you put down should be concerned with what it is doing and not having to hold the concerns of something else, like the home page shouldn't hold concerns of the search field. What you need to take away from this is really what I'm defining is I really want you, when you create files, to not cram everything into one file. I need you to separate concerns. If you just put that in here, you'll be miles ahead of where you are today. This is just standard engineering practice. But from an AI standpoint, it has no idea that's the practice it's supposed to take on, because the instruction we gave it was, oh, on this channel page, I want to search also. An analogy that I use in this case is something like, imagine you got a new robot for doing your laundry, right? It was a laundry robot, and your room was all of your clothes. It was also your room, but your clothes were just everywhere, dirty and clean. So they were just all over the floor, a mess. What likelihood, when you say, hey, robot, go do my laundry, what likelihood do you think that it will get only the dirty clothes and not accidentally pick up a clean sock and wash it, or forget a dirty sock? So that's what we're really creating when you create things where the concerns are all mixed together, and it's very difficult for a system that doesn't have your own intention in mind. All it knows is the instruction you've given it, which with vibe coding rules, bro, dude is supposed to be super light. We're not supposed to say much. Hey, I want it kind of purplish. And in fact, it'll make it kind of purplish. But if there's a whole bunch of other things in that concern, you'll get things purple or non-purple that you didn't mean to change. And so that's what we're really talking about. Separate the concerns, you'll be in more control. Guarantee, just keep that in mind. So my file says a whole bunch here. You can pause it and read it. Go to ChatGPT, it'll give you a better one than this. Okay, full disclosure, I also wrote one for theming. I just happen to know, same kind of consideration for theming. But what will definitely happen in many of these systems is when you start saying things like, no, I want the background to be dark, or I want it to be blue, or I make all that text, make just that label green. It will hear you say, make that label green. And sometimes it won't think, I need to generalize that. What they're asking for is the label on the forms need to be green, any form. It's saying, oh, literally the label you just mentioned, I'm going to go make green. So the way you're describing, you have to understand you're a partner in this. If you want this to be successful moving forward, you have to understand that part of your role is to say, I need to be kind of clear about what I'm asking for. And one way to do that is to put down these early files, these rules files. It's now worth saying that we've structured the system and tuned it a little bit in the way that we want it. This might be considered sort of a fine-tuning mechanism. We're trying to ask for a specific kind of outcome when we ask generically for other things. What is going to happen here, depending upon when you're seeing this, it is entirely possible a lot of these rules are not necessarily like explicitly needed any longer. It may be that I would expect that these tools going forward will start applying some of these generic architecture rules to them, so that when you start up a system, it may come back and say, I kind of want a React web application. It may come back and say, do you want this kind of web application? And it will build these rules for it. So essentially, everything kind of structures in a given way. We won't care as coders that are no longer necessarily looking at code level, but it will keep the AI from kind of meandering around and creating these other mistakes or kind of colluding changes that were unintended. So I would expect that will happen. The system that you're in at this point may be that already, frankly. But at the same time, this policy, these concepts are really standard concepts. So you're not ever harmed by saying, I want you to manage your stuff in this organized way. Just like your mom or your dad used to tell you, clean up your room, you'll be happier, you'll have more space, you'll be freer to think, those kinds of things. That's all we're trying to say is you'll understand what you have if you can see it and you understand what it is. So moving on, we're now going to take a step into making this application kind of fun. We're going to move in. Here's what remains so far. So we have kind of a terrible looking mocked up version of an application that goes from one page to the next. What we want is to turn this into a, let's call it a weak version of a YouTube channel interface. But to do that, we need the YouTube API. And that's something that I don't know a lot about. I've used it in a couple sample projects like this, toy projects, but I don't know it. I've never looked into it intentionally. I let vibe coding and I let AI kind of understand the structure underneath it. And I've been able to be pretty successful with it. So I think that will be your experience as well. We'll have to request it. You'll see us do that. That's really very, very easy to do, though it's maybe 5 or 6 steps to get there, unfortunately. And then we're also going to create the channel page, hope that it gets separated correctly, and then maybe even put videos on that page, like the top 10 most recent videos or something like that as tiles on that page. And then we'll be done. But really our next step is to see, was this successful? This should go very quickly, by the way, other than getting the YouTube key, which I'll leave a fair bit of that in so that you can really see the steps that I took, but it is really pretty straightforward to do. So let's dive in and see what that looks like. All right, so here we are. We're gonna close all this stuff down, and I know I promised we were gonna move forward, but here's a little trick. Depending upon which editor you're in, which version of editor you're in, certainly for something like Cursor, we're lucky enough that Cursor and other systems very often when they get started in these projects will create a Git repository for us. You might not have Git installed, you might have other challenges, so skip this if so. It's not that big of a deal, but it is very nice to be able to do this. If you do, this third icon on the top panel on the left today will get you to your source control panel. And really all we're gonna say is we're gonna just check in all of our files. So now at this point, you can see down here, we have this commit, which has all 9 files changed, 3,000 insertions, this kind of stuff. So if we want to get back to what it looked like right after it created the application, we can just run from here. We can also later, if things get really messy, just come back to this one and run this one. And so that's what these commits are for. They're very, very useful in that way, just as a sanity version of, hey, it's kind of working. I'll just come over to this third tab, type something in, or indeed, I'll even use this generate commit message, which will look at the files and create a message for you and do save. At the very least, do that. I would advise pushing this stuff up to GitHub as well. This has a very simple way to do that, but that's your own. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out a way to add the YouTube API to this, but we don't need to do that here in Cursor. One of the things we absolutely will need, in fact, we can ask, I'll come to chat just so you can see that this can be done over here as well. I want to start using the YouTube API. What steps do I need to do to be able to use that API? And just like any other LLM, it will give you the answer here. This is the way to go to Google Cloud, and we will open that. And in this Google Cloud environment, it's worth describing. I'm already in a previous application. So what we're really going to do is create a new project. I don't know what yours will look like, but assuming it just generally looks like this, but you're not in a project yet, you'll need to create a project. So we'll go through that step. So we'll do is new project, and what are we calling this? YT vibes. Oh, no underscore. YT vibes. Okay, we're going to create that application. It's going to tell us I'm creating the application. Once it gets created, we'll select it. Then we'll see YT vibes up here. So now we're in YT vibes. We're halfway there. We need an API in service, and up in the top in an odd location, but we're going to need to enable an API. And it just so happens they have this here, search for this, close enough. And when I select this, I'm going to need to enable it. We're about 85% of the way there now. You're almost done. Okay. And as you can see, we've clicked enable. We're at the place for doing credentials at this point. Okay, we're supposed to go to API services and credentials. So that's going to credentials and then click create credentials, which is at the top here. And what we really want is an API key. I'm not really sure why it's telling us that we want a client ID. And the screen that comes up after that will have your API key in it. Copy that API key. We'll need it in a second. And at this point, I'm going to say, great, I now have a YouTube API key. I think I need to store that in the system somewhere private and use it so that we can fetch the right data, like at least in the search field where we're searching for things. Can you kind of help me through that and build the things that are needed? So what I will do is I'll put my key into both of these places, save, and then move forward. And I'll see you in just a sec. Okay, this file is picked up when you start a server. So what I'm going to do is show our terminal down here and Control C to cancel the server, to stop the server down here. And then I'll start it again. And then whatever I've put in my env local file will then be passed on. It can only be passed on that way. It's not one of these live changes. So you'll see env local was the environment passed on, which is great. So, all right, so now we have the env local information being passed in, we think that it's created some application that will use that. Okay, so here we are. This is a good example. This is one of the things vibe coding does. It's wonderful. The field that we had previously was this search channels, but for some reason on its own, it decided, well, what kind of YouTube Explorer would we have if you couldn't also search videos? So it created a search video URL. Let's first search users to see if, or the channel to see if that works, because that was the one that we were putting in place. Let's first start there. This other one, which we didn't want, maybe we do want it, who knows? But interesting, this will happen in vibe coding from time to time. I also want to look in and see, did they really separate that the way we expect? Let's see what happens when we search for a channel. Showing channel information, channel details were to be displayed here once we use it. Okay, maybe. And then let me get a video ID. All right, and come back here and search for a specific video. And that doesn't do anything. So I don't really know what it's up to. Let's ask our buddy. Okay, so I notice you've added a search for video field as well on the homepage. I don't want to deal with that just yet, but I didn't ask for that, so that's curious. But the search for channel one certainly does send me to the next page, to the channel page. I think I need to display something on that channel page, so maybe create a panel to display channel information to prove that we're actually calling the API. All right, so let's stay over here and see what it does. All right, so we're getting an error here. All right, so now it's saying it's going to take the channel name off of the URL and pass just that. Excellent. So, okay, so we are at least showing something here, but I expect that for images, we're going to start running into a little bit of trouble because of the way this system needs allowance to be able to pull information from images from different locations. All right, so one more thing here. Nice and quick. Let's take a look and make sure that it is separating the code appropriately the way that we would like. So I'm going to close some of these down and take a look at, this is the channel page. So on the channel page, they still have the search channels at the top, and error, they have the channel info component. So that's good. They've created a component for that. Let's take a look at the actual homepage itself, where they added a new video search mechanism. So you can see here's search channel, here's search videos. So they are keeping that separation going. So that's great. They're following our rules. This starts to create a much cleaner separation of the different parts, and thus they're going to be both very reusable and very focused when you're making changes to them. All right, I will say, just for a little bit of fun, let's go through some very fast. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to kind of do this in kind of super jump cut for you. Let's do some very fast vibe coding to get this thing looking a lot less ugly, because good Lord, this looks terrible. I need to kind of tell it to clean up a little bit. Let's start doing that. One of the things I will do is I will paste images in and talk to it from that standpoint very frequently. This is good. Nice work. We now have a channel page that works. You're using the YouTube API exactly as expected. So nice work there, by the way. There's a bunch of problems here. First off, this is kind of sinfully ugly. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I know we haven't worked on design, so it's okay that it's not yet good looking, but I would like this cleaned up to be something that wasn't drawn with crayons. This looks ridiculous. This doesn't look like any standard application. A header bar with that search in it and maybe an icon for the search button. We don't need a label above the search field over and over because there's a placeholder that tells us what it's for. The placeholder is too light. It's super light gray. All the text in that search field is super light gray. This huge gradient on the top of the channel page looks terrible. The images are not showing up. The information about the channel is not succinct enough. It's kind of, let's collapse this. Let's turn this into a much smaller representation, much cleaner, because this page is not only going to be about the channel itself, we're also going to show other things on this page. Visual theming guideline. Okay, where do we find ourselves here? We have a solid header. This bar feels a lot better. He simplified the numbers, so it's looking fine. It's certainly serviceable. Okay, so that's looking great. Let's tell it to clean up the front page. The front page needs a lot of help too. It's really pretty nasty. Somehow this should be cleaner. In fact, I'm almost certain that we don't need two fields to search for two different things. I think you can figure out if somebody is giving you a URL to an image versus a channel, right? Okay, so this is our new, excellent, that works. All right, last test. Let's see what we can do. Okay, one more thing. What I'm looking for is like maybe show the most recent 10 videos on a channel when I go to it. That would be kind of cool. All right, it says it's done with that. Let's take a look. We reload this page. Aww. Back to the wells. Okay, after a few more changes, let's see where we are. Okay, excellent. So we now have the channel information showing, the video information showing. We're using the YouTube API, a whole bunch of things that I didn't do, don't know how to do, don't care to do. So let's very briefly jump back into our code itself to see if the structure is cleaner. Ooh, wait, home's getting a little bit thick. Ooh, that's pretty much a mess. What are you doing? Wow, okay, crazy. What are we seeing in here? Okay, so I was looking around. I feel like what's going on this homepage is pretty darn messy. So all I'm going to do is show you a trick, see if it helps, but I'm going to remind it of its separation rules. I feel like the main page has a lot of concerns on it. Maybe you didn't follow the separation rules appropriately. Can you clean that file up? Let's see what he says. He's going to look at the page, separation rules, and examine the main page. I can see several concerns. URL parsing logic for the channels in there, search form component is in there, search form validation and routing logic, layout, presentation components. So exactly what we were saying, it's just basically got everything in it. This is maybe an example of no matter how much work you do, you should try to be a little bit helpful with your agent. You should walk around and take a look every now and then at checkpoints to say, does this file look too big? And just ask it. You don't have to know. You don't have to know the difference, but you've already told it, I want you to separate this stuff. Sometimes it won't. This is AI. So our mileage not only may, but absolutely all the time will vary. Leaving this and not correcting it is the thing that will drive you bananas later that you make some changes. And the search field here is different than the search field on the channel page, and changing one doesn't change the other, or changing one changes something else on this page because it's nested. All of that nonsense we've been talking about. So this is a great example of, wow, you kind of went off the rails. Even though I've done my best to tell you how to do this correctly, it's still your responsibility. The tip here is not write these rules files. That's not really the tip. The tip is separation of concerns. Try to make sure that you're aware of that concept. It will help you in the long run, and you'll be able to use AI for a lot longer. He went through and separated a lot of things. If we look at this file now, it is far cleaner. That's basically the whole file. And that's the way we would prefer to see it. There should be a search form. There's a little bit of information. It's essentially the same over here. That's how it should be drawn, right? This is the kind of thing that should happen. So it's not hard to do, and you can ask AI to do its own audit. You just need to remind it to do it from time to time. Okay, we're in a semi-working space at this moment. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna jump over here and hit the please commit this stuff for me. So at least I have this checkpoint for enhanced channel search. Great, we can come back to this if anything breaks. But so now I'm gonna go really quick. Let's see if we can have some fun. This kind of stuff you can try on your projects as well. This is gonna be kind of a big one, I think. So I want some real changes to the expression of this page, the way that it shows up, and the whole application. It feels very simplistic, kind of base template right now. I want something like tremendously elegant. I want different fonts. I certainly want a very stylized, attractive font for the title, and it needs to be nice and pretty and bold on the homepage and reflect that as a small logo on the header of the channel page and other places that use that header, so that if you click on it, it comes back to the homepage. And the name of the application should be maybe Vibe Explorer. And instead of Vibe Explorer, let's call it YT Vibes. And also simplify. I don't need any of this other information. I just need the title and the search on the main page, on the front page. And I don't really like the off-white gray background. I don't mind the color. Maybe if everything was in a completely different color tone, highly sophisticated, not round borders around everything, maybe just underlines as borders, those kinds of things. I want something very elegant and very different. That should also carry over to the tiles that are on the channel detail page. And absolutely, the information on the channel details itself, the channel information panel that we have, it shouldn't have a drop shadow. It shouldn't have any rounded information. It should be maybe 2 lines high, but feel like a header on a very attractive news site or something like that. So I want this to be super slim, super streamlined, very tight on the typography, very unique feeling, and lightweight. That's what I'm looking for. Now, I just swear, I've gotten definitions like this from designers in the past, and the very first thing you kind of do is go, what? What does any of that mean? So let's see what AI can do with it. Pulls in separation and theming. Score. See you in a second. Wow. You guys don't know this, but that was a really long change. It did a tremendous number of changes in all of this. So let's take a look. Did it do well? Let's find out. Wow. So that's very different. Okay, that's interesting. That's very, very different. We were looking for different. We got different. Okay, excellent. I cannot complain. That did a good job. All right, so there we have it. Vibe coding level 2. It did a great job. It certainly cleaned things up. It definitely kept things separated in the way that we wanted it to with these latest changes. It goes off the rails as we've seen, so just keep an eye on it. Get in there every now and then. If you see one of these files is red, go tell it that it's red. It'll fix it. Don't let that stuff go, because it will be the stuff that makes you just have to walk away and say, vibe coding's good, but once it gets complex, it doesn't work anymore. It really actually can. I've built on a single project for quite a while in this way. As long as you're allowing it to build a highly structured application, you're perfectly fine. So this was fun. At least we have a good stopping point, something that looks like a fun application to use. Hopefully next time we'll get into more of the video page itself and maybe a little bit of AI usage, maybe even storing this information on your Google account so people can log in. This kind of stuff is also very easy to add, very fun to see. So that was great. All right, so this was a lot of fun to kind of go through what it looks like to build an application using AI, or basically just vibe coding with it to build an application that, all told, actually, I couldn't build by hand without a fair bit of learning. I need to go figure out the YouTube API. I would need to figure out specifically how Next.js is kind of managing its offline resources, those kinds of things. There's some things I just don't know, and I've been doing this a long time. But really, the level 2 tip is really a meaningful tip. You're a partner in this. It is not something that you're firing off a missive and hoping that the perfect application comes back. And when it doesn't, you can fire off a simple memo, and what will come back after that is the perfect application. So it's just an opportunity to say, I can vibe code and really build something fun very fast. That's excellent. Have fun. I couldn't agree more. Don't look. Just let it make a mess. It's perfectly fine. I do a lot of that. But when you think, oh, wait, I might build something from this, or I might want to do more with it, get it cleaned up, separate it, give it some files, give it a little bit of guidance. I guarantee you this will absolutely change the way that you see coding in the future. I really think that vibe coding, or this kind of coding, is the honest future of coding. And that's kind of a hot take from someone that's been doing real intense engineering for decades. Make my living that way and love doing that kind of coding. This is going to change everything. This is the word processor of coding. There's no turning back once these systems get to a certain level of sophistication of being able to implement this kind of architecture and not make generic mistakes, because not every application can be executed and see what's wrong with it in one quick view like we have here. Some systems have thousands of underlying features that don't correlate with one another. You can't exercise them all the time. So test cases and some kind of standard testing system underneath it that's really going to be required so that it knows how to run those tests when it's making changes. I think that's where we go. But from a back and forth of how I'm trying to implement a specific feature in a given moment, there's no way that this isn't the future. So get in now and have fun, but the reality is you're really teaching yourself to be a coder of the future. These won't be doing it on their own for quite a while, but they will be doing a lot of it. In any case, thanks for coming along on the ride with this one, and I'll see you in the next one.